When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Witness, Part 3. User: VA703. Posted March 11th, 1998.
The air was stagnant and still. This skeletal mound was the first sign of violence I had seen since agreeing to accompany Ida. It sent a chill through me. Who went to war, Ida? We were climbing again. The drowned city and its secrets fell away. Those of us who believed in your potential and those who resisted change. That we had more resources than we could ever hope to use on our own did nothing to sway the opposing faction. Your paradise became to them a symbol of non-existent oppression, an apocalypse in waiting. They struck first before it could be completed. We retaliated, a civilization unused to warfare quickly discovering an aptitude for it. More than an aptitude, a craving, a thirst for conflict which quickly overwhelmed our reason. History, art, memory, they no longer held any value for us. Death became our obsession. A thick gray haze wreathed around us both, obscuring my view of our ascent. How did it end? No answer from my traveling companion. Ida, how did the war finally end? At length, they spoke. I will show you. The fog thinned until it was no more. We were in what had to be the planet's stratosphere, its immensity curving away in a blue-green glow. At such an altitude, the ground was a muddy, indistinguishable mass from which a million thick, fibrous brands stretched tautly past us up out of sight. Each was as big around as my body and made up of many smaller strands. Every now and then, one shuddered, making a sound like the string sections of 1,000 orchestras tunelessly grinding their bows. Suspended among the coarse webs were orbs burning so brightly they may as well have been miniature suns. Their color was the same black and red I'd seen over and over. Dread grew in me with the strand's every atonal squeal. Ida, what is this? You asked how the war ended. This is the answer. The binding place. Those of our enemies who survived battle were brought here. A war council, led by myself, decided that if they would not extend mercy to a powerless race such as yours, then they themselves were not worthy of it. Their bodies were bound to the soil they refused to cede and forced to produce these strands, which were then driven into the hearts of distant planets. The clockwork mechanism of the universe slowly tore them to pieces. Thick gobs of oily flame oozed from the spheres, dripping down to the horror which lay below the clouds. The inner luminance of one, already muted, faded into nothingness. I was dumbstruck. Ida, we wouldn't have wanted any of this. It's monstrous. Others came to feel the same way. Collective suffering at last penetrated their bloodlust, and they pleaded with me to stop. And what did you do? Their hearts hang before you. The strands groaned with the movement of the spheres, further mutilating the helpless dead out of sight far below. We soared over crystal peaks higher than any Everest or Kilimanjaro, all soaked in the burning blood of Ida's people, an entire world anointed with suffering. Nausea. I don't care to see anymore. Ida stopped our forward progression. We hung in place over a waterfall, its contents of a sickening piece with what had come before. We are not yet at our final destination, what I have contracted you to witness. My laugh had no humor in it. I've witnessed more than I ever care to. The scale of all this death is overwhelming. I feel sick, don't you? You've murdered so many, and for what? For me? For us? We didn't ask for this, to have all this blood on our hands. Ida's voice was again soft. It was not for you, not truly. It began that way, yes. However, it was for my own glory that I came to fight. I see that now. My own spiraling madness drove me to butchery. I cannot even say that it was some desperate final act which led me to relent. I returned to my senses again only in the yawning loneliness that followed victory, when I was the last of my kind. A shower of blue and white meteors cascaded through space. I hid here, away from my crimes, in the firmament, journeying to the universe's furthest regions when I could no longer stand the silence. I first sought oblivion, then peace. Finding neither, I began to search for purpose. As ever, it was the people of Earth who showed me the way. Not the Earth you know, a variation where the Third Age has begun, ushered in by planet-wide cataclysm. From the chaos, a new fuel source was born, a bright green stone they named Shihite. And for years, I observed in secret as it enabled a remarkable new civilization to spring up from the ashes of the old. Beauty blossomed from seeds planted in brutality and death. Amid that beauty, I found the purpose for which I'd been searching. I returned home. We were moving again, down through the clouds. I braced for whatever nightmarish scene awaited and was surprised to see crystal clear waters in every direction. Sleek black fish leapt at our passing, cool winds carried a trilling bird call. Even though eons of war had sapped most of my strength, I would finish the project which had driven us apart. Eden would be completed. The results are before you. Flora and fauna collected from 1,000 worlds, arranged in carefully balanced harmony. Sea gave way to a lush forest, and gray skies to golden sunlight. Animals which had no earthly analog gambled beneath a thick green canopy, and in clearings where vibrant blue and white flowers, their petals easily as big around as a man's head, swayed gently. Multiple jeweled peaks divided the forest, themselves heavy with nature. On one, I counted wild cinnamon and peppers, on others, trees of aloe, almond and balsam. Groves of fragrant galbanum stood high and proud, sunlight dazzling off their bright yellow buds. For the first time in our journey, I was carefully placed on solid ground. My legs shook for a moment, then steadied. I felt my apprehension bleed away into the grass at my feet. The air was sweet and clear, the way it had seemed when I was a child. Tears pricked at the corner of my eyes. Your passage here is the last one of which I am capable. Does this place please you? Ida asked quietly. 1,000 emotions swelled inside my chest, momentarily choking off my speech. It was all I could do to nod. I have one final thing to show you. Follow me. A gust brushed past me, stirring the foliage ahead, and so I followed. The soil was loamy, springing back up after every step. A flurry of tiny, coarse-furred hairs stampeded past me in the opposite direction, threading through my legs without a hint of fear. Quadrupeds whose narrow heads sat atop long, thin necks regarded me disinterestedly as they chewed lazily on leaves. I walked and walked, Ida always calling me on, just out of sight. Not once was I slowed by fatigue. If anything, the longer I was in this place, the more rested I felt. Over the rushing of an unseen waterfall, Ida's voice sounded tired. Our journey is almost at an end. I stepped out into a clearing. At its center, a giant tree, its branches heavy with a bright fig-like fruit, dwarfed everything which surrounded it. Its smooth brown bark gave off a rich, spicy scent. I was overcome with a familiarity and longing too old and powerful to be mine alone. Ida, why do I know this tree? The Great Mother rose at the center of creation, another gift from those who came before. When a species matured enough to reach the mother's branches, her fruit allowed them to understand the interconnectedness of all things. From there, they could begin to build a just society, returning when necessary to be reminded of their place in the cosmos. Harmonious millennia passed in this way. Through it all, the demiurge watched with envy. It resented what it saw as blessings being wasted on smaller, weaker creatures and concocted a successful scheme by which the Great Mother's fruit would be theirs and theirs alone. It barricaded entry to the garden where she resides, and since then, all that lives does so believing it is alone, divorced from its brothers and sisters. And it is not her, merely a cutting given freely by the mother in a moment when the demiurge's guard faltered. One of the branches hung down far enough to bring its fruit to eye level. That which hangs here cannot provide the knowledge hers does. It is merely an echo. Still, belonging to one another is the birthright of all living things, and an echo of that truth is better than silence. This is what I brought you to witness. The round, ripe fruit came away from its stem with little effort. I looked around for my host. And what happens to you now? I lay down among the flowers until I am called to the web to join those who have gone before. All this just to drift away in the quiet of a sunny day? There is no better way. Eat, you will see. And so I did.
Subject: a desert honeymoon. User, 18 Lil Luck. Posted, February 3rd, 1996.
My wife Margie and I eloped in 1972 when we were 19. Just tossed some bags into my El Camino and headed to Las Vegas. It was what you might call an act of defiance. I loved her, but my parents were intent on me going to college, and for some reason they saw my relationship with Margie as incompatible with that. Truth of the matter is, I did eventually go to college and never would have made it through without her. Heck, I wouldn't have made it through the last 25 years at all without her, and that is a fact. Back then, you couldn't get married on the Strip in Vegas, so we went downtown to a place called the Little Flower Chapel or something like that, next door to the Howard Johnson. We more or less stayed in the hotel for 3 days, the details of which I'll spare you before hopping back into the car to slowly make our way home. When you're young, you feel like you've got nothing but time, so we wound our way back east slowly, cutting through Arizona and then up toward Monument Valley, which was a special request from me. See, as a kid, I was really into westerns and had always wanted to see the buttes in person. I had no earthly way of knowing what we were going to run into down there and that I wasn't ever going to see Mountain Valley in the light of day, but that's how it worked out. The Arizona leg of the trip was to visit Margie's sister, Robin, in Flagstaff, except Robin didn't know we were coming and had a terrible summer cold when we arrived. She wasn't in any shape to have company, and we didn't want to run the risk of getting sick on her honeymoon, so we said our goodbyes and kept moving. It was late afternoon, and the shadows were getting long, but we decided to push on, since Monument Valley was only 3 hours away. Margie was on map duty, and she informed me that the closest town to our destination was a little spot on Highway 160 called Kayenta. I don't remember what time it was when we saw the markers counting down the miles to Kayenta, but it was late enough that darkness was gathering at the base of the mountains. There was no way we were going to see anything worthwhile in Monument Valley if we arrived this late, so we opted for a motel instead, the Whittlemeyer or something like that. It wasn't the Ritz or even the Howard Johnson, but it was cheap and clean enough we felt comfortable getting right back to those things newlyweds do. Everything was fine until just after midnight. We'd tired each other out and were dozing on top of the covers when we woke up to what sounded like dogs howling in the distance. That, in and of itself, isn't out of the ordinary, but for some reason, the sound set my teeth on edge. It seemed like a good time to draw a line under the night, so we got under the covers and turned out the light. Margie asked me to put my arm around her, and I was happy to oblige. I could feel myself melting back into sleep when the howling came back. This time, right outside our motel room door. From the way Margie stiffened up in my arms, I knew she must have woken up as well. As we lay there listening, we heard what sounded like shuffling footsteps just outside our door. We weren't the only guests in the motel, but these dogs seemed to have fixated on us. These shuffling footsteps crossed back and forth in front of our room for maybe 10 minutes. Then came a knock at the door, 3 short, hard raps. I went to get up and see what was going on, but Margie clung to me, whispering, "Don't go," in my ear. The rapping came again, followed by the manager's voice calling out, saying there was a problem with my credit card and that I needed to let him in to resolve it. I again started to pull back the covers so I could get rid of this guy, but Margie held even tighter. This time she whispered, "We paid cash for the room, remember?" I thought about it for a moment and, she was right. We'd never so much as shown the clerk a credit card, never mind paying with one. You could do that back then. The knocking intensified and the manager's voice continued to call me. We didn't know what to do. The closest phone was in the office, and to get there, we'd have to get past whoever was on the other side of the door. I didn't yet understand we were dealing with a what rather than a who. Finally, I drew myself up, put on my shorts, and walked to the door where I said something like, "You got the wrong room. We didn't pay with a credit card." The shuffling steps stopped. When the voice spoke again, I had the uncanny impression that the speaker was smiling. "Mr. Robinson," it said in the casual voice of a school teacher gently correcting a student for getting an answer wrong in front of the class. "Of course you did. I have the impression right here. Please let me in and we can resolve this without involving the police." I looked back at Margie, who frantically shook her head. Her fear was starting to get to me, and I had to take a breath to steady myself. "No," I said, "I think you better just call the police." There was a sudden hammering on the door so hard I was shocked it didn't splinter. Margie screamed, and for a moment, there was silence. A moment later, a different voice called out from the other side of the door, "Margie? Margie, is that you? Are you in there?" She blanched and drew the covers up around her. "Who is that?" I whispered. She spoke so softly, I was barely able to hear her. "It's my father." Margie's father had died in a car accident when she was 12. He was a cruel man with a drinking problem and plowed the family car into a tree with Margie and her sister inside. Margie was badly lacerated, leaving her with lifelong scarring along her forearms, while her sister, who was sitting up front, was killed on impact. Her father survived on life support for 2 more days until finally succumbing to his injuries, and yet here he apparently was, calling to us from the other side of a thin motel door 1,000 miles away from home. My guts turned to ice. The voice took on a commanding tone. "Margie Hawthorne, let me in there right now." When I turned toward her, I expected to find Margie weeping, but instead she was getting out of bed. Even under the circumstances and the darkness of that dingy motel room, she looked like a goddess. She still does. Margie called out to the voice that claimed to be her father. "Daddy, is that really you?" "Yes, baby, it's been so long. Please let Daddy in so I can see my little girl." "Daddy, if it's really you, can you tell me your middle name?" Silence. "Daddy, just tell me your middle name so I know it's you." Nothing. "You don't know his middle name because I don't know it. Isn't that right, you son of a bitch?" The howl that came from the other side of the door was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It was a sound of pure, inhuman rage, and it hit us like a physical force. We dropped to our knees, our hands clapped to our ears. It could have gone on for seconds or hours. I genuinely have no idea, but when it ended, we collapsed against each other, our backs to the door, and stayed there till the sun rose. As soon as it did, we grabbed our clothes, hopped in the car, and drove like hell out of town. 2 hours later, in Cortez, Colorado, I pulled over so we could get dressed. I said to Margie, "How did you know what to say?" She finished pulling her t-shirt over her head, then stood there for a minute. Just when I thought she wasn't going to answer, she said, "My dad never talked to me like that. I was never his little girl or his baby." Hearing his voice was shocking, but once I stopped being shocked, I realized something. He wasn't talking to me the way he had, but the way I'd wished he had. Whatever was out there was somehow pulling it from my mind. That's all I could think, and so I came up with an experiment to try and prove it. I guess it worked. She opened up the passenger side door and got in. The early morning sun was shining, and Somewhere nearby, a scrub jay was calling. Whatever had happened the night before, I knew one thing for sure. Marrying Margie was the smartest thing I'd ever done, and that's still true all these years later.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.